Welcome back to another episode of Prime Time. I've got Nick beside me. We have had a big month, Nick.
Very big month.
Yeah,
Long time between sessions.
Yeah, we were in the US covering UFC 299. We got to see Cheeto Vera, Sean O'Malley. Great card in Miami.
Then straight into Tim Tszyu against Sebastian Fundora,
Which
who I think got robbed.
I'm personally going to say he got robbed. Even with the big cut, more significant strikes, I think Tim Tszyu was hard done by then. He's not going to get a rematch.
Allegedly, not a rematch.
So we're at Tim Tszyu. That led all the way to WrestleMania, ticking off a childhood dream.
One of the greatest WrestleManias of all time.
I would say arguably the best WrestleMania of all time. I want to give a quick shout out to The Rock because we criticised him coming back. It's just Hollywood Rock coming back. But he elevated every story. So I just want to say that. Thank you, Rock, for making WrestleMania what it is. And I'm sure he's going to be back down the line. Then UFC 300. We finally came back home, covered what we could of UFC 300, and now we're back in the swing of things, covering WWE, UFC, combat sports, boxing, rugby league, all sports. Euros coming up just quietly.
Euros, NBA playoffs is in the running right now.
NBA playoffs is in full swing, so that brings us to the first fan question.
Fan question for this week. Do you feel sorry for LeBron James?
Well, no, I don't, okay? Because you've been the GM of the Lakers for the past 2 years. When you haven't been liking how they've been going, you're the first person to open up trade season and pick whoever you want to come to your team. If D'Angelo Russell's letting you down, if Anthony Davis is letting you down, it's been on you.
Okay, but if you look at the most recent game where he scored 12 fourth quarter points, he had literally everything going for him. And then in the fourth quarter, yes, he missed an open three, but Denver came back on a 20-point lead.
I don't want to be Skip Bayless. You can't blame the Lakers blowing a 20-point lead on a couple of bad calls. Yes, D'Angelo Russell got fouled. It was a disgusting call, and they reviewed it too. But at the end of the day, LeBron did also miss an open three. I don't want to be Skip Bayless. It's just not clutch. Does MJ at the back end of his career miss that three? No. Steph Curry doesn't miss that three.
Well, MJ missed that three at the back end of the career. We'll never know because he wasn't in that position.
Okay.
Respect the longevity. But I say, do you feel sorry for him in the sense that at 39 years old, he should have a better team around him, and the younger players should step up in those moments. He shouldn't have to be required to put the team on his back in the fourth quarter.
You want to be in LA, you've picked the team around you, you're commanding a supermax salary. You got to do what you have. You got to play with what you have around you. And I'm just going to say, he was never going to get past Denver anyway. This was the only time I think they could have stolen a game. Yeah. This most recent game, and they can't.
Games 1 and 2, they've blown big leads.
I think they win one game at home in LA, and then it's done. It's going to be a 4-1 series.
Gentleman's sweep.
Yeah, a gentleman's sweep. A gentleman's sweep. Now, going over to the NRL. NRL around the grounds, okay. Josh Schuster is walking away from Manly with $1 million.
So he's been officially cut, officially terminated.
Officially released. They've settled. They've done a settlement outside of court. No one's had to be taken to court. As a settlement, he's being paid $1 million to leave Manly.
That is probably the dream scenario for any player ever. So you're telling me that he doesn't have to play for Manly, has to do nothing for them, gets paid $1 million, and then can go to another club and get paid more money?
It's daylight robbery. It is. He's robbed the Manly Seagulls. If you're Josh Schuster's manager, you've successfully robbed the club, and good on you.
That's one of the greatest managerial things I think a manager's ever done. Usually managers rob players of money. Yeah. This guy's secured him $1 million.
Well, essentially, this has happened countless times in the NRL. When a player is paid extremely overs, you saw Josh Reynolds on 900, 800,000 playing for the West Tigers, and they're playing in reserve grade, and they say, listen, I'm happy to stay in reserve grade if I'm getting paid this much. Josh Schuster would have happily stayed in reserve grade if he was going to earn that amount of money. I know there was clauses in his contract, but anyway, they've settled. He's getting $1 million to leave the club, which means he can get paid. He could sit on this money for a year or two, but he's going to earn this money and potentially earn another 200, 300,000 playing for another club.
Did he come back fat and overweight on purpose?
If he's done this on purpose, just to claim his money, he's a genius. But no, I don't think so.
We saw James Harden come back to Houston Rockets camp looking fat and overweight. He got traded. Josh Schuster could be just copying a page out of his playbook. I'll come back fat and overweight, get paid $1 million, and then go to another club. I'll take that.
Yeah,
it's a great chess move.
It's actually an indictment on the people at Manly who signed this oversized contract, knowing that he hasn't really proven himself in first grade yet. And I like Josh Schuster. I think he's a player of the future.
I think the Bulldogs should sign him. I'll just put that out there.
Yeah, I think he'd be a great addition to the Bulldogs. But what about Kalen Ponga? Out for the season potentially. Could be a couple of months injury. It's some broken foot bones.
It's a Lis Frank fracture in his foot.
I'm not NRL physio.
Yeah, it's a weird injury, but it does do something where you take a significant time off. And again, it's not a head knock, so you can't really say it's a recurring injury. Just unlucky.
Again, I think this definitely hurts the Newcastle Knights. They've been they need Kalen Ponga to be a successful team just to make the top 8. To be honest, they don't really have any strike power across the park. He is their draw. He's their attacking weapon. But this also hurts Queensland. I'm going to say it hurts Queensland because there's some injury concerns, particularly and errors around Reece Walsh. I love Reece Walsh. He's a spark, and he's proven himself in Origin as well. But a lot of errors in his game. Kalen Ponga has been one of the best fullbacks over the last 2-3 years.
Dally M medalist, reigning Dally M medalist. And Cam Munster, injury concerns over him. Kalen Ponga said he'd fill in at 5'8". That's off the tables now. And if you look at some Newcastle fans, they're saying, oh man, how bad luck, what the bad luck we've got. Then some fans came back at them. Yeah, you're going to come 14th instead of 16th now. You're going to come 16th instead of 14th. So, look, they were having a pretty poor season. They lost to Canterbury.
Everyone was still on a high for the run that they had on the back end of last season, and it hasn't translated to the start of this season, not at all. They just got bashed by the Bulldogs, which is hard to do.
It's very, very hard to do. I think in the last 5 years, the Bulldogs have maybe touched up 1 or 2 teams. So if you're falling into that category, you're probably a shit team. That's just the way it is.
So ultimately, this does mean the Newcastle Knights will finish anywhere from 18th to 15th. Genuinely.
That'll happen.
Yeah. So we just spoke about Queensland chances in Origin this year. Again, I think fairly high under the guidance of Billy Slater. Great coach, I'm sure he is. But New South Wales, we've got a new coach, Michael Maguire. If you're Michael Maguire right now, who is your New South Wales fullback? You've got James Tedesco, you've got Tom Trbojevic, Ryan Pappenhausen, who's in form, and maybe Dylan Edwards, who's just a reliable guy.
If we're picking between Tedesco, Pappenhausen and Trbojevic, I'm taking Pappenhausen. I just think he provides more of an X factor than what Tedesco does. Yes, Tedesco has the experience. Yes, he's the captain. And yes, he's, probably the more, in terms of backup play, in terms of activity on the field, run meters and all that stuff, he maybe beats Pappenhausen. But we need something to break open the game. We need someone to actually create an extra man, score tries, and that's where Pappenhausen does a better job than Tedesco.
If Pappenhausen stays in the form that he's in, he's going to get picked by Michael Maguire. He wants to make a change. There's going to be some sweeping changes this year. It's not going to be the same sides you've seen over previous years. But also to that point, I still think Tedesco is a top 3 fullback in the competition. I'd say it's Reece Walsh, Kalen Ponga, Tedesco. Just based on longevity, he's always playing. He's not out, all the time. Yes, he has that concussion issue. And I'd say that's mainly because of slippery boots. He should get metal studs. If Tedesco doesn't have metal studs this year, he's not playing Origin. I think it's time to give it to Ryan Pappenhausen. He's been waiting for this opportunity for a while, whether he was going to get picked at 14 on the bench or not. Let's take a gamble on him. He's going to provide some spark at the back.
And if you look at the other talent that could be in the running, Latrell Mitchell, he's been out now, injured or whether suspended, and he doesn't look like he's in shape to play Origin fullback, and he's a better centre. Trbojevic, you could say the same. He's a better Origin centre, so why play him at fullback? Dylan Edwards, again, I don't think he's creative enough to be the man to take New South Wales to a series victory. And Tedesco, he's had his time. They've lost back-to-back series now, so you're out. For me, you're out.
Can Tedesco play anywhere else in the lineup?
No, he doesn't.
Because like Latrell has played in the centres, like Latrell could play on the wing, could Tedesco play on the wing?
With age, Tedesco has lost his speed and acceleration.
You're telling me Tedesco couldn't just slot in on the wing? Because you'd want that carry out of your half. I know they've hinted at maybe selecting Suwali, which I think would be great.
I'd much rather Suwali.
But you're telling me Tedesco doesn't even earn a spot in the centres or on the wing?
He doesn't. Just because he doesn't have the X factor or the power that you need from your centre. I'd much rather pick Jack Wyden, Latrell Mitchell, Trbojevic, who can break open a game from that position.
So if Latrell comes back healthy, he gets picked in Origin?
100%. And that's just from learning from the past 2 years. You haven't had Latrell and you've lost.
And it's been a success when he has been in the centres.
He's definitely a centre. And if Michael Maguire wants to take a gamble and transition from the old guard of Freddie Fittler, you've got to change your fullback and change your captain.
That's completely fair. Now, looking at the NBA Finals, like we said, the NBA Finals, probably the only time people actually tune in here in Australia to the NBA. The regular season, for me, goes too long. It gets very boring.
It gets boring and it just gets repetitive. The playoffs, they play harder.
They tried to do the in-season tournament. We were there for the in-season tournament.
Didn't work.
Just, the Lakers probably celebrated way too early.
But players themselves, for example, Jimmy Butler, they say, I don't really care about the regular season. I try hard in the playoffs. Now it's playoffs. The basketball has gotten much better. The quality it plays much better. So that's why people enjoy it more.
100%. Now, with Nikola Jokic, if he goes on to win another championship this year, and he is granted MVP this year, is he one of the greatest in his position to ever do it?
If Nikola Jokic wins the NBA championship this year with a finals MVP, he guarantees himself as a top 10 player all time. And that's because if you look at his resume, he's already a 2-time MVP, possibly 3rd-time MVP.
Can I say this will be a white player going into the top 10 list?
He's an NBA champion, could be a 2-time NBA champion, which would escalate him into that category. The only players that have 2 finals MVPs, you're putting yourself in the upper echelon of NBA players. He's a triple-double machine. If you look at the way he played on the weekend against Anthony Davis, he was bullying him. So he can play the bully ball, he can play the finesse basketball. The way he plays, he's easily one of the greatest players ever. And then if he has the accolades to back that up, how could you argue that he's not a top 10 player ever?
Okay, apart from Luka Doncic, he does deserve MVP this year, right?
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a smoky because they got the number 1 seed, but he's not as good as a player as Luka and Nikola.
So, what I'm getting at is, if he wins MVP, wins a championship this year, what's people's reservation from saying he's a top 10 player?
Just longevity and tenure. You still got to put in the time. If he retires early, people
Which it sounds like he wants to do. He wants to get away from the NBA.
People that have better stats, you know, the career stats, the more assists, the more points all time in their career, that's what will probably prevent him from being in that discussion. But if you're looking at pure accolades, he's already surpassed so many players. You look at someone like Kevin Durant. He's only a 2-time champion and a 2-time finals MVP, and he has 1 MVP. Nikola Jokic is about to have 2 or 3 MVPs and 2 finals MVPs. So if they're the best team and he's leading the charge for this, how can you not argue that he's better than these players?
Yeah, that's fair enough. Where do you see the Lakers versus the Nuggets going? How does the rest of this series play out?
Well, we said it before. Most likely going to be a gentleman's sweep. 4-1. I'm actually going to say a sweep because I think Jamal Murray...
You don't think Lakers pick up again?
I think that game winner just broke the hearts of the Lakers players. You saw Anthony Davis in the press conference. He couldn't even sit there. They asked him to just recount the play. What happened? He hit a shot
wouldn't
and
say
walked
that's
off.
insulting, mate. It's very insulting.
That's your job.
You just asked me. Well, he just shot one over me in front. Well, you saw it. How do you want me to recount it? Well, I was on him. I marked him. He couldn't do anything about that.
Yes,
What
he
do you want
could.
from him?
You're 7 foot tall. Block the shit out of that.
No.
Put more defensive pressure on. What do you think he's going to do? Drive on you? Of course he's going to fade
Jamal
away.
Murray wasn't his best game either, but I mean, it made up for a clutch shot at the end there, winning the game. D'Angelo Russell's come out and said he promises Los Angeles Lakers fans that there's still a lot to go in this finals, but I also think he said that last year.
Yeah, I think he's going to be saying that next year when he's in China as well.
Yeah, okay, there you go. Well, that's the NBA finals. We also had the Clippers game currently going right now.
Currently going on.
So a lot to pay attention to in the NBA finals, but we'll heat up as it gets closer to the NBA finals. But I want to talk about the prime curse. The prime curse. It is real. It's a new phenomenon, particularly for fighters, okay? Boxing, MMA.
Combat athletes.
Combat athletes. There's a new curse. The prime curse just dropped, okay? Look at Devin Haney. On the weekend, Ryan Garcia, he said what he said about Prime. He thinks it's the devil, okay? He thinks anyone that signs with Prime, it sucks. He thinks the drink sucks. On record, he says it's going to kill you.
And just as a preface, going into this fight, Ryan Garcia was basically crazy. He was paying 7-1, and if you looked at the shape he was in, he missed weight. Devin Haney's supposed to be someone that wakes up at 4 o'clock in the morning. He's training 5 times a day. He's in a strict regimen where he's one of the best fighters and one of the most conditioned people in the world, and he got knocked out or basically nearly got destroyed by Ryan Garcia.
Okay, so that's one Prime athlete down. Then you look at Israel Adesanya, signs with Prime, gets knocked out by Sean Strickland. One of the biggest upsets in UFC history, mind you.
Didn't get knocked out, just got beaten.
Got beaten by Sean Strickland,
Yeah.
knocked down a fair few times,
Yeah.
and really didn't do anything to Sean Strickland.
Sean Strickland made Adesanya look like his bitch.
Okay, so another Prime athlete down. Alexander Volkanovski. This hurts my heart because he's Australian. Signs with Prime, loses a fight to Islam. A lot of contention there. Gets knocked out by Islam in the rematch. It's like a downward trajectory for fighters. Then there was a photo that came out of Jamal Hill drinking a Prime. Looked a bit pudgy while he was doing it too. Gets knocked out in the first round by Alex Pereira. So if you're a fighter right now, I'd avoid all colour primes. I'm being serious.
If you're a combat athlete and someone mentions the word prime, just run in the other direction.
Yeah.
And it lends even further. If you're a sporting team and they offer to sponsor you, just out of, caution, stay away. Barcelona, they're not doing too well. Arsenal, they continue to choke.
Haaland and Man City. I don't think they're going to go as far as they did in previous years.
If they don't win, it's strictly because of the prime.
I think it'd be Prime.
And then you look at Bayern Munich. Harry Kane hasn't won a trophy in his career. You pair that with Prime, Bayern Munich's title run ends.
The next Prime athlete to fight is Jamal Crawford. So if you're a betting man, I'd just be aware of the prime curse. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, that could be good for Tim Zeus. So maybe Tim Zeus, really on the forefront of this prime curse.
Yeah, I'd just keep an eye on it. But new curse drop, keep an eye out for it. That brings us to our top 5. We do our top 5 every single week, so make sure you subscribe to @Kairouz Bros on YouTube and @Jon-Bernard K on Instagram and TikTok. This week's top 5 is top 5 football players of all time. When we're talking about football, we're talking about soccer. So top 5 soccer players of all time.
At number 5, Ronaldo Nazario, R9, the original Ronaldo, one of the greatest strikers of all time. He's won 2 Ballon d'Ors. He had some bad knee injuries which ended his career early. But if you look at him now, yes, he is fat.
He's overweight.
But in his prime, he was one of the greatest players of all time. That's why he's at number 5.
I've been loving him collaborating with some streamers as well. I think he's starting to understand how to raise his profile outside of football, R9. Number 4, I'm going Diego Maradona. Now, some consider him one of the greatest of all time, both on and off the pitch. Okay, he had some bad habits, but he knew how to have fun.
He knew how to have fun.
He had the 1986 World Cup. He's a god to people in Argentina, in Naples, Italy. He's one of the greatest of all time.
One of the most entertaining play styles, one of the most entertaining players, on and off the pitch, like you said. At number 3, we're going with the Brazilian Pelé. He's your grandfather's favourite player. And if you look at it, 3 World Cups. I think he scored a hat-trick in the World Cup final. He won a World Cup at 17. He's one of the first international superstar soccer players. It's inarguable that he's a top 5 player.
I mean, there is some argument. I mean, all Brazil... You
don't count
how many goals did he actually score? We don't know. You got to really look at those history books. How accurate are the history books?
1,291 goals is what is recorded.
Someone's seen all of those goals.
As a Guinness World Record, Pelé has scored that many goals.
I don't think you can go far back. Were they all televised?
He may be one of the most overrated players, but out of respect, Pelé's in the top 5 greatest players of all time.
Number 2, and this was a close second, Cristiano Ronaldo. He's doing his thing in Saudi Arabia right now, but he is one of the greatest of all time. Look, 886 goals, 5-time Ballon d'Or winner.
Cristiano Ronaldo has won every trophy possible. He was one of the greatest midfielders of all time, then became the greatest striker of all time. He's one of the greatest looking players of all time.
Beautiful.
Great partner in Georgina.
Highest Instagram following of any athlete.
He's one of the most popular athletes of all time,
Look,
one of the greatest soccer players.
He's won everything for his club and his country apart from the World Cup.
Which brings us to number 1, Lionel Messi. It wasn't going to be anybody else. All the experts, all the former players will say Lionel Messi is the greatest player of all time, 8-time Ballon d'Or winner. He's won every single trophy possible, including, and most importantly, the 2022 World Cup. If there was any question on his GOAT status, the 2022 World Cup answered that question.
Solidified it. Now he's doing his thing with Inter Miami. Earn your money. You've done well, Lionel. He's the greatest player of all time.
And what makes Lionel Messi better than Ronaldo, and personally why I think he's better than Ronaldo, he's a better playmaker than him. If you look at the goal scoring stats, yes, Ronaldo just beats him, but if you look at goals and assists, there's no one even close to Messi. It's Messi, and then there's a country-filled mile to second.
Okay, that's fair enough. Well, that is our top 5 football players of all time. I'm sure you can see that list everywhere. There might be some contention in there.
But this is the Kairouz Brothers one.
This is the Kairouz Brothers top 5 football players of all time. And that brings us to UFC. There's been some big announcements.
Very big announcements.
Since our last prime time. Huge announcements. Conor McGregor is main eventing international fight with Michael Chandler. That's been in the works for some time. You've got Islam Makhachev main eventing 302 in Newark, New Jersey.
Against Dustin Poirier. Who would have thought that would happen? Doesn't deserve it, but it's happening.
Well, I mean, there's been some circumstances. He won his last fight against Benoit Saint Denis. He's getting that fight. Could you imagine Dustin Poirier wins the championship?
I mean, look, if he wins, he does deserve it because he's had a fabulous career. He's got a fabulous resume. But in terms of actually getting the opportunity for the fight, doesn't deserve it.
But speaking about Conor McGregor's card, it is Ireland versus Michael Chandler, the American, okay? But someone that's called out Colby Covington, Ian Gary, is saying, sign the contract. He wants to be the co-main event on this card, an Ireland versus America card. Does this fight even happen?
I think it has to happen at this point. I think you've heard Daniel Cormier. They've gone back and forth at each other now.
But it's the only fight Colby should take. It's in his division. It's going to sell pay-per-views. They're going to go at it. Ian Gary's wife's going to be brought up. The press conference is going to go nuts. If you want to skyrocket pay-per-views, I mean, Conor McGregor's comeback is already enough reason to buy this pay-per-view. But if you want to skyrocket it, let Colby Covington and Ian Gary go at it at the press conference.
I think with the amount of bad words that have been said between them, there has to be a fight. Otherwise, what are you guys going at each other for?
Well, to be fair to Colby Covington, he said he would only sign the contract if these 3 demands were met. And he wanted some demands from Layla, Ian Gary's wife, and until they are done, he'll sign the contract. So in Colby's defense, once those deliverables are achieved, he will sign the contract.
I just don't see why Ian Gary wants this fight. Just if you saw that 296, he pulled out because he probably couldn't handle the backfire from just the press conference alone.
Because do you know why he wants this fight? Because if he knocks out Colby Covington, even if he beats Colby Covington, it puts all the words asleep. You can talk all you want, but once you're in the octagon, words don't mean anything.
Again, though, you're pitching it as USA versus Ireland. Do you really think Conor McGregor's going to take the side of Ian Gary in that press conference?
No, but it's also national supremacy.
I'd actually be more worried of Conor McGregor saying stuff about my wife than Colby Covington. He would say 1,000 times worse things and more viral things as well. So Ian Gary, proceed with caution.
I think they'd be able to promote their own fights, but like I said, I want to see it happen. And if it opens up, a Colby Covington versus Ian Gary press conference, interviews, them digging into each other, it's just more entertaining for the fans. And it's going to be a good fight. Colby was very disappointing in his last fight. Very disappointing. He has a lot to prove. Ian Gary has a lot to prove too. I mean, he wasn't overly convincing in his last fight, and he wants to make a statement in his division. So it's a fight to see. Also a big announcement, UFC 304 confirmed in Manchester.
Who's going to main event this fight? They've talked about Aspinall, obviously defending his interim championship. It'll likely be against Curtis Blades. Ian Gary, is it possible to be on that card?
I think Leon Edwards has to main event that. He's the longer reigning champion.
And he's actually the undisputed champion.
He's the undisputed champion. It's going to bolster up the card having Tom Aspinall on there, another champion. Tom Aspinall co-main. You'll have Bilal versus Leon Edwards. Finally, he's getting this fight in Manchester. And Bilal's talked it up a lot. He's been going at Leon's team. He's saying he can take anyone on their team. He's been campaigning for this fight for almost 2 years now. You're finally going to get it. This is your one time to solidify yourself.
Well, I think there's been that much backlash against Bilal Muhammad fighting that it's actually created interest. The longer you leave it and the more that you say he doesn't deserve it, the more I actually want to see him fight. Because you're saying he doesn't deserve it, he's going to do his best to try and put on a show. And it's in Manchester, so you already have the home crowd, Leon Edwards, Tom Aspinall. You throw Michael Venom Page on that card as well. You've got a great card.
Who does MVP fight? He says he doesn't want to fight Wonderboy because their styles will match up too similarly. Ian Gary's going to be fighting Colby Covington allegedly. So who do you match up with MVP?
I mean, if he's got balls, he can fight Shavkat.
Shavkat? Apparently, Shavkat's not going to be ready till later in the year.
That'll send you up the rankings. I'm just saying, you're either going to fight Ian Gary, who he's had some war of words with as well, or you fight Wonderboy because you just do what the UFC tells you. At the end of the day, you've come here.
You still have to prove yourself in your division, but he is 1 to 2 more wins in his division from a title fight. Just because of his age, and if he keeps putting on great shows like he did against Kevin Holland, he will eventually earn that title fight. So he just needs not a tune-up fight, but someone that is a decisive, I can earn a title shot.
He needs to beat someone like Shavkat, then. You've got to beat contenders. So either it's going to be Wonderboy or Colby Covington or Shavkat. They're the top 5 right now.
Okay, fair enough. Looking over to WWE, they're in a new era. Everyone's calling this Paul Levesque era. They've announced that at least 20 times in the last 2 weeks.
I mean, if you go back to the Elimination Chamber, they've just really piped up how good Triple H is.
Yeah, why do they keep mentioning how good this new Paul Levesque era? It's like they really want to get away from something.
They're trying to get away from something. I don't know what it is, though.
I don't know what it is. But on this Paul Levesque era, this new era, do you think Cody Rhodes can carry the company like Roman Reigns has carried the company since the pandemic?
I think what is going to happen is what happens to most baby faces is you lose interest in them because they can't call out anybody.
Even his promo with Jey Uso on Raw recently, right?
Copped a lot of hate.
He was getting some comments like, Cody's very cheesy. He can be very boring. This promo sucked. And I know the internet is a bad place for that, but is this just the build-up to can we sustain liking Cody Rhodes for this long?
Well, the internet is one thing. Then there's actual money. He was the top merch seller on WrestleMania weekend, over $1 million. So if you're looking at someone as a babyface and as a superstar, that's a significant sign. Yes, some Twitter comments might say he's not interesting, and I'm one of those Twitter comments.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that he's not interesting. It doesn't mean he can't carry.
But you know what's going to get him through this title reign? It's going to be this feud with The Rock. He's continuing this feuding with The Rock, and it's going to last a year all the way, whether it's SummerSlam or whether it's WrestleMania, and that's what's going to keep it interesting. And the bloodline, I'm sorry to say, even with Solo carrying this new bloodline, is still the main attraction in WWE.
Well, if you looked at a stat that I saw, SmackDown, the highest rating segment has always been the main event. The first time in over 2 years, the highest rated segment wasn't the main event. Cody Rhodes was on the main event, and Solo Sikoa and Tama Tonga were much earlier in the show. So the bloodline still rules. They're still the most intriguing part of the product. So you can't really argue with numbers.
So is Cody Rhodes going to be carrying the company, or is this bloodline story still going to be carrying the company? Regardless, it's still good, great long-term storytelling. WWE, they're doing something right. NXT is going to be at the UFC Apex in Las Vegas pretty soon as well.
TKO.
So that partnership is flourishing. But that is all we have time for Prime Time today. Thank you for tuning in. Always remember, subscribe at Kairouz Bros over on YouTube. And back to you in the studio.